What if one of the biggest artists in the world just quietly started leaving breadcrumbs everywhere, and most people completely missed them? Because that is exactly what seems to be happening right now with Doja Cat, and once you start connecting the dots, it becomes genuinely hard to look away. We are talking about a woman who has repeatedly proven that she operates on a completely different level than almost every other artist in the industry. She does not do things by accident. She does not post randomly. She does not drop hints without intention. Everything Doja Cat does has a purpose, and right now the internet is buzzing because fans believe she is building towards something massive, and they might be absolutely right. So today we are going to break down every single reason why people think Doja Cat is planning something huge in 2026, what the evidence actually looks like, what her history tells us about how she operates, and why this particular moment in her career feels genuinely different from anything she has done before. Stay with me, because this gets really interesting really fast. Let me start by giving you some context, because to understand why fans are so convinced something big is coming, you need to understand who Doja Cat actually is as an artist and as a strategist. This is not just a talented musician. This is someone who has completely reinvented herself multiple times, each time shocking the industry and then somehow topping herself. She went from internet novelty act with Say So to one of the most critically discussed, commercially dominant forces in popular music. Then she pivoted hard with her Scarlet era, embracing an aggressive, harder sound that genuinely divided her audience. That division, completely intentional. She has said as much. The reason this matters is because Doja Cat has established a very specific pattern. Before every major move she makes, there is a period of unusual quiet, strange social media behavior, cryptic imagery, and fan speculation that reaches a boiling point. And then she drops something that recontextualizes everything. Every single time. The fans who pay attention have learned to treat her silence as loudly as her statements. So what is happening right now that has everyone convinced something is coming? Let me walk you through it piece by piece. First, there is the social media behavior, and this is where things start getting genuinely interesting. Doja Cat has always used social media as almost a performance art space. She engages directly, she trolls, she confuses, she entertains. But over the past several months, fans have noticed a distinct shift in her online presence. There has been a kind of deliberate pulling back combined with very specific, almost coded aesthetic choices in the things she does post. The images, the references, the color palettes she has been gravitating toward online all feel thematically connected in a way that fans are desperately trying to decode. When an artist who is known for using social media as an extension of her creative identity suddenly starts being more selective and more visually cohesive in what she shares, that is not nothing. That is a mood board. That is the beginning of a rollout. Second, let us talk about the collaborator activity, because this is often one of the most reliable indicators that something is coming. When producers, writers, and featured artists that an artist is associated with start showing very specific signs of activity in the studio, or start liking certain things online, or make comments that fans piece together, it tends to mean that recording has been happening. And in Doja Cat's orbit, there has been enough of this kind of activity in recent months to make people genuinely pay attention. Now, nothing has been confirmed explicitly, but in the modern era of music, almost nothing is explicitly confirmed until the day of. The signals matter more than the statements. Third, and this one is really fascinating to me, there is the question of timing. Doja Cat has been notably absent from major features and from dominating the cultural conversation in the way she was during her peak commercial run. And that absence feels less like a step back and more like a deliberate retreat before a massive surge forward. Think about it this way. The artists who come back the hardest are almost always the ones who went quiet for a significant stretch. The audience misses them. The cultural space they occupied starts to feel empty. And then when they return, the impact is exponentially bigger than if they had just kept grinding away the whole time. Doja Cat is smart enough to know this. She has talked about understanding the music industry as a game with specific rules and strategies. Going quiet at the right moment is one of those strategies. Now let me get into the fan theories specifically, because some of them are genuinely compelling, and some of them are the kind of creative speculation that only a truly dedicated fan base can produce, which is honestly impressive in its own right. One of the dominant theories right now is that whatever comes next is going to be a significant sonic departure even from Scarlet, which was itself already a huge departure. Fans are pointing to certain aesthetic cues, the kinds of artistic references and inspirations she has been engaging with visually and publicly, and arguing that she is building towards something that might incorporate influences that fans have not heard from her before. There are people who think she is moving towards something more experimental, more avant-garde, potentially less concerned with radio accessibility than anything she has done before. And this theory actually makes a lot of sense when you consider her trajectory. Each project has pushed further from the center of pop. If that line continues, the next destination is genuinely uncharted territory for her. Another theory, and this one is particularly interesting to me, involves her visual identity. Doja Cat has always been deeply invested in her own image, but the visual references she has been gravitating toward recently seem to point towards something very specific in terms of an aesthetic evolution. Some fans have picked up on what they describe as a thematic thread running through her recent references, something that feels darker, more surreal, more rooted in visual art and fashion than in traditional pop star aesthetics. If she is building a new visual world to pair with new music, that is a much bigger undertaking than just releasing an album. That is a full creative universe, which is exactly the kind of scale at which Doja Cat has always wanted to operate. There is also significant discussion in fan communities about a potential live show or tour announcement, because Doja Cat's live performances have historically been a massive part of how she connects with audiences, and she has been relatively quiet on that front. Some people are speculating that whatever announcement is coming is not just an album but a full-scale live experience component that accompanies it. Given the current era of music where the album is almost secondary to the experience ecosystem built around it, this theory makes a lot of commercial sense. Let me pause here and acknowledge something important because I think it is worth being honest about. A lot of this is fan interpretation, which means some of it will inevitably be wrong. Fans are extraordinarily good at wanting to see patterns, and when you love an artist, every small thing they do can feel like a signal. Not every signal is real. Not every breadcrumb leads somewhere. But here is what makes this particular case more credible than typical fan speculation. It is not just one or two people picking up on one or two things. The convergence of multiple independent observations, the social media shifts, the collaborator activity, the timing, the aesthetic cues, all pointing in the same general direction at the same time. That kind of convergence tends to mean something. And there is something else we need to talk about, which is the cultural context in which all of this is happening. 2026 has been a genuinely fascinating year for pop music so far. The industry is in a very specific moment where the artists who are going to dominate the next cycle are the ones who do something genuinely unexpected, genuinely bold, genuinely different from what the market has been producing. The artists who play it safe right now are getting lost in the noise. The ones who make people stop and actually pay attention are the ones who take real risks. And risk-taking is literally what Doja Cat has built her entire identity on. This is the kind of cultural moment that Doja Cat was essentially born for. She has never been afraid of alienating people. She has never been interested in just giving audiences the comfortable, familiar version of herself. She has said in interviews that she gets bored incredibly quickly, and that boredom is one of the main drivers of her creative evolution. If she is bored with where she has been, and the evidence suggests she might be, then what she is building toward is probably not what anyone is expecting. I want to spend a moment on something that I think gets underplayed in conversations about Doja Cat, which is just how genuinely capable she is as a complete creative entity. We are not talking about an artist who works with a team that hands her a product to perform. We is talking about someone who is deeply involved in every aspect of what she puts out, who has demonstrated real versatility across wildly different sounds and styles, who takes creative risks that many far more commercially successful artists would never dream of taking. Whatever comes next is going to be genuinely hers, and that matters because it means it is going to be genuinely surprising. There is also the question of what she has been saying, or more accurately, what she has not been saying. Doja Cat is not known for being coy or diplomatic about her opinions. When she has something to say, she tends to say it pretty directly. The fact that she has been relatively restrained about discussing future plans, given her history of just freely discussing whatever she is thinking about, feels significant. It suggests that whatever she is working on is something she is actively protecting, something she does not want to let out prematurely. That protective silence is a really interesting tell from someone who is normally so vocal. Let me bring up something that I think is going to be really important as we get closer to whatever this announcement or release actually is, and that is the question of how the industry and the critical establishment respond to her. After Scarlet, the critical conversation around Doja Cat got very interesting. There were people who loved it, and people who felt alienated by it, and that polarization actually ended up being one of the most interesting artistic conversations of that year. Whatever she drops next is going to land in a critical landscape that has now been recalibrated by that experience. People are going to come to it with different expectations, different frameworks, different willingness to engage with the unexpected. In some ways, that makes the stakes even higher. In other ways, it gives her more freedom, because people already know she is willing to go places they did not expect. I also want to touch on the business side of this, because Doja Cat is not just an artist, she is a brand and a commercial entity, and understanding that dimension helps explain some of what might be driving the timing. Album cycles in the modern industry have very specific rhythms, and the gap between Scarlet and whatever comes next is reaching the point where, from a pure industry logistics standpoint, something needs to happen soon to maintain momentum and market presence. Record labels and management teams think in very specific windows, and those windows are narrowing. This is not a cynical observation. It is just context. The commercial imperative aligns with what the fan community is already sensing intuitively. And speaking of what the fan community is sensing, I want to give proper credit to just how sophisticated Doja Cat's fan base has become as interpreters of her work and her signals. This is a community that takes its interpretive work seriously. They archive everything, they trace references, they build timelines, they cross-reference her public statements with her actions, and they do this collectively with a kind of crowdsourced intelligence that is genuinely impressive. When this community reaches something approaching consensus that something big is coming, that is not just wishful thinking. That is the output of thousands of hours of collective analysis by people who know this artist's output better than almost anyone outside her immediate circle. So let us get to the actual question. What do fans think is coming? What does the evidence actually point toward? The most compelling version of the theory, the one that seems to have the most convergent support, is that Doja Cat is preparing to release new music that represents another significant artistic pivot, one that potentially incorporates a much wider range of influences than anything she has done before, paired with a completely reimagined visual identity that she has been quietly developing for the past year or more. The nature of her recent aesthetic engagement suggests something that is simultaneously more personal and more ambitious than Scarlet, which was already quite personal and ambitious by mainstream standards. Some fans are also pointing to potential multimedia elements, meaning that whatever she drops might not just be music and visuals but could involve a more immersive storytelling component, possibly building on the world-building elements that were present in the Scarlet era, but expanding them significantly. This would fit with her stated interest in creative projects that go beyond the traditional album format, and with the general direction that the most artistically ambitious releases in recent years have taken. There is also quiet speculation about collaborations that might genuinely surprise people, partners that nobody is currently predicting because they seem to come from completely different sonic or artistic spaces. This is exactly the kind of move Doja Cat has made before, reaching across genre lines to create something that cannot be easily categorized and therefore gets a disproportionate amount of attention and discussion simply because people cannot place it in an existing box. Here is what I think is ultimately most interesting about all of this, and it is the thing I want to leave you with as we get toward the end of this breakdown. The reason people believe something big is coming from Doja Cat is not just because of specific evidence, although the evidence is real. It is because of something deeper, something about who she is as an artist and how she operates in culture. She has earned the expectation of the unexpected. She has established a track record of doing things that nobody saw coming, and somehow making them feel inevitable in retrospect. She exists in a rare category of artists where the announcement of new work does not just generate excitement about what the music might sound like. It generates genuine anticipation about what kind of conversation the work is going to start, what it is going to mean, how it is going to land in the culture. That quality, the quality of making people care not just about the product but about the cultural event of the product, is extraordinarily rare. And right now, with all the signals pointing towards something being built in the background, with the timing right and the cultural moment genuinely ready for something bold and unexpected, Doja Cat might be on the verge of creating her most significant cultural moment yet. Whether or not every specific fan theory turns out to be correct, whether or not the timing is exactly what people are guessing, whether or not the collaborators and sounds and visuals end up matching the speculation, the underlying instinct that something significant is coming feels grounded in something real. Something in the air around this artist's trajectory right now suggests a build-up, a gathering of energy before release, a deep breath before a plunge. And if history is any guide, whatever she is planning is going to be worth the wait. If you have been following the Doja Cat fan community and have picked up on signals I did not cover here, drop them in the comments because I genuinely want to know what you have noticed. And if you think the fans are reading too much into things, make that case too, because that conversation is worth having. Hit subscribe if you want to be here when whatever this actually turns out to be finally lands, because that video is going to be extremely interesting to make. See you in the next one.